Hello to my water signs, Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces. Welcome to the Gemini full moon. You'll find the timestamps for your rising sign listed below. Hello Cancer rising, welcome to your horoscope for the Gemini full moon, happening on Monday the 27th of November at 8:16 p.m. if you're in the southern hemisphere with me. Now if your body is close to mine on the planet at this full moon, I highly recommend looking over to the eastern horizon at 8:15, 8:16, because as the moon rises, as the moon crests that eastern horizon, it will be exactly full. And so this will be the moment to instigate that conversation. This will be the moment to feel that intensity from this moon that we've been waiting for after eclipses, after a lot of loss and a lot of grief and a lot of sorrow. Gemini is the sign that needs to talk about it. If we think about the imagery of Gemini, it's the twins, right? So there's a consistent conversation between two sides. If we think about the sort of glyph of Gemini, it's the semicircle and the semicircle with two lines connecting those two. Now the astrologer Alan Oken says that that could be an image of mirrors reflecting light and love and hope to one another. That's a beautiful sentiment. In tarot, Gemini is the lovers, which can echo that philosophy. And we see that there's two folks here, and there's a conversation or a mirror, an echo with spirit, with the angel in the sky. Perhaps the angel represents love. Now, it's not just light and it's not just love that we come to face when speaking about lovers, when speaking about relationships, when speaking about our self. There's a shadow there that creates the light, just as the light creates the shadow. And no amount of striving to the light in times when the shadow is beckoning is going to help. We need to honor both. That's the trick with Gemini, is we recognize the duality and we accept both. In the esoteric philosophy of astrology, the soul mantra for Gemini is I see my other self, and in the waning of that self, I grow and glow, waxing and waning, one and the other, tied in, tied out, such as the moon will have it. Now you, being a moon baby, being a moon child, led by the moon, you understand this implicitly. You can probably time your emotional ebbs and flows to the month, to the week. As you move and follow the moon in its cycles, you recognize the different parts of yourself and your psyche and your makeup, your emotional body, your water is affected by the moon. Maybe at a Gemini moon, there might be a feeling of tension, or there might be a feeling of opportunity, depending on what side of the coin is showing up. We're speaking about your 12th house, cancerrising. This is an area that is very private, and it's sort of something that maybe isn't shared so much publicly or even through conversation, which is tricky because it is Gemini that longs to communicate, that longs to talk. When it comes to your inner chambers, when it comes to your essence, quiet, alone, there's a duality there. That's something that is innate in your nature, perhaps lessons that you have come to grips with in times gone by, maybe. Another point of conversation to have with Gemini is the idea that we must let instability do its work as well. And so perhaps those inner chambers aren't so free-flowing and convinced as we would like them to be. And that's all right too. It's finding the right words, the right language to operate and to work with this duality, this multiplicity of your nature. I often think of Catwoman when I think of Gemini. In fact, I've convinced myself that that's what I should be thinking about. So I've worn my merch and done my eye. But Catwoman is a sacred deity of mine that has existed in my consciousness since I was 8 years old, since the movie Batman Returns was released on the 16th of June at 5 p.m. in Hollywood. That was when the premiere took place. And at that time, the sun was in Gemini at 26 degrees in an exact conjunction with Venus in Gemini at 26 degrees. Also, FYI, the asteroid Selena was in Gemini too at 11 degrees. Selena being the namesake of Catwoman, Selena Kyle, and also the goddess of the moon. I've been thinking a little bit about my own Gemini moon placement and how my body needs to talk about it when dysregulated, and how difficult that has been for me to find the conversation for, and how frustrating that must have been for folks in my company at times throughout my history in dealing with this duality of emotions. They run hot, they run cold. My internal workings, my Gemini moon will have this conversation happening quite a lot. There's something same but different about the qualities of a Gemini moon and also the 12th house, a Gemini 12th house. So to have a full moon there for someone like you that is so moved by the moon, there might be some light and some shade, some conflict that occurs at this time. And so when I think of finding context for my life using the astrology, just as I gave you that funny example about Catwoman, there's something about remembering when the moon is about to strike Gemini, especially when it's a full moon, that there might be some deep internal conversation that you're having with yourself. The sun is in Sagittarius, so opposite in your 6th house of your daily rhythm of the repetition that you encounter in the day. And if we think of Sagittarius as mutable fire, we think about magic, and we think about a container for that magic, about sort of a wise understanding and patience with magic. The rhythms of your day, there might be a bit of a tune that you've found or you're able to find in your meditation, in your commitment to the cycles of the day. What we're dealing with here at this full moon is a beautiful spotlight on the moon in the 12th house, the unconscious world. There's also some agitation that's buddying up with the sun. In fact, the day before this Gemini full moon, there would have been an exact square between the planet Mars, who has just been through a trial by fire in Scorpio and is new, is reborn, with the conviction to play the long game, but to take out the aces when the time is right and reveal things that have been hidden for some time. On your birth chart, cancerrising, Scorpio is your 5th house of your creative self, your artistry, your voice, your perspective, your expression, your joy. And so this, for the next 2 years, now that the dragon's tail has moved from Scorpio, I feel that this is fertile ground for you to start planting some seeds. But Mars has left this initiation straight into Sagittarius, straight into a square with Pisces in your 9th house of your philosophical ideas, your religion, what that means to you, and how religion has played a part in your life as well. The planet Saturn is a malefic, one that brings tough lessons. So is Mars. And so this square between two agitators is something that we always make a mark of in astrology. Pressure between your daily private magical ritual, your rhythm of the day, how you do things that might be a little out of step or alternative to other folks, and some harsher pain points, some boundary in either philosophical study or your relationship with religion and faith itself. I think a lot of the water signs are feeling this test of faith at this time. And there's probably a lot of emotions that we're sort of working with that you're hyper aware of, cancerrising, that have put faith into question. And so maybe this pressure, it will ease, but it's something I'd like you to keep in mind, because this conversation between rhythm privacy and faith is pretty sharp. So maybe you are being invited to be your true Cancer self and to have a conversation with the moon, to listen to what they might be trying to tell you, or to be able to engage in your relationship again with the moon. There's a lot of things that I feel a heaviness, I feel a sadness. So if I feel it, you must be feeling it twice as much, 3 times as much. When I think about this trial by fire that Mars has just encountered, the last time that this happened was at the end of 2021. So this point, November, December of 2021, there's a lot of similarity to the initiation of this astrology as there was to then. The square between Mars and Saturn, which happens once a year, I believe. This happened between Mars in Scorpio and Saturn in Aquarius. So there was something about a sort of like, it feels like that there's sort of like a container to your grief that you've been holding on to, cancerrising. And maybe now with this new cycle of Mars and Saturn, and this new found pride in the way that you express yourself and how you've come to learn and how you've come to share what you know, strategies, how you've come to like help people talk about their emotions. Cancers are really good at that. There feels like there's sort of like there's a refinement to this quality in you, cancerrising. But maybe it includes your feelings too. Maybe you've had to go through these feelings in order to advise on them from what felt like limitation, because we had to sort of keep things going and keep, the wheels in motion, keep this ship running. It feels like people need and will ask you how you've been feeling and what you need, and how they can find avenues for you to express yourself in a way that is honourable, that sort of abides by this transition. That's what it feels like. Every Scorpio placement, every sort of like activation or talk in Scorpio, now it feels like transformation, transition. The skin has been shed. The dragon's tail is gone. And for you, we can let the cat out of the bag and start expressing it. I'm going to get you some tarot, I think, cancerrising. Redefining, re-energizing, reassessing our faith, what we believe in, what we've followed to be true, what we've maybe in some ways not, there's like a search for meaning. And Saturn in Pisces in your 9th house is a container to lose faith is harrowing, as I'm sure that you understand. And in times like this, it does feel like faith is in question. But it takes bravery to change, to transform, to wriggle out of the old skin or the chrysalis, and to emerge as this version of yourself, to find this language, to express it, these new colors, these new forms, these new shapes. It takes strength in a way that the Strength card speaks to so beautifully. It takes strength from a place of grace, from a place of kindness and a yielding quality of understanding. That's true strength. To hold focus, but to not retaliate. I think that this initiation of Mars in your creative zone speaks to me of the blossoming that your self-expression will take over the next 2 years, cancerrising. There's no sense in saying you've been through what you've been through in order to make you stronger at times when the grief is so palpable or the pain is so palpable. It's the last thing that anybody wants to hear. And it's also probably a bit clunky to use that kind of language. But if you can look at yourself and admire yourself, if you can use the mirror of Gemini and see yourself for what you're becoming and who you are, what you stand by, which is love and empathy and understanding and kindness, and find the strength in that. There's power here, and there's stuff for you to make with this. Because you've got it in you. You've got the magic in you, Cancer rising. It's been with you since you were born. You can teach other people that. You can see it in other people too. It'd be great for you to recognize that it's in you too. That wand was in your back pocket since you were a kid. Go out. If you don't have one at the moment, go out, find yourself a stick. I believe what you see, Cancer rising, and I believe what you feel too. And this anguish, this external pressure, this sorrow, this sadness, I feel it too. And it's great to talk about it. It's great to talk about it with the moon. It's great to get it out. That's your reading, Cancer rising. It's a little muddled. Take what resonated and, of course, leave the rest. I love you. Now, we are heading into gift-giving season, so if you wanted to gift a reading to somebody, send me an email at youareok@umaruby.com and we can organise a gift voucher, a gift certificate for you to give them. If you have been holding off from getting a reading from me yourself, go for it. Go to umaruby.com and book yourself a place with me. I can't wait to meet you if I haven't already. You can send me some tip money at buymeacoffee.com/umaruby, and you can also subscribe to this channel for 10 Australian dollars a month. That would be very much appreciated at this time, Cancer rising. I appreciate it. That's it from me. I'm going to have a little rest, I think, before I continue with the next ones. I was it's this ebb and flow of sort of finding the words, but then second guessing them, and finding the words and then second guessing them. But I guess that's sort of something that Gemini can sort of speak to as well, is that not every conversation has to have a resolute, finite solution. Sometimes we just sort of start and we start to get things out there. When I'm looking at your 5th house, Cancer rising, I'm really encouraging and looking forward to the sketchbook and the tests that you come up with. When I look at your 12th house, I can see that audience, that union that you have with the moon really privately. When I'm using all this word about conversations and getting it out there and talking about it, this is your 12th house too, so do keep that in mind. Talk to the moon about it. Talk to Selena. Hello, Scorpio rising. Welcome to your horoscope for the Gemini full moon happening on Monday, the 27th of November at 8:16 p.m. if you're in the southern hemisphere with me. So if you are close to me on planet Earth, crane your neck over to the eastern horizon, because exactly at moonrise, the moon will be full, its fullest. And so this will be a perfect moment to start doing that shedding ritual, having that conversation, talking about things that we need to get off our chests. Now, I do apologize for missing the Scorpio new moon horoscope. I was unwell and I couldn't do this work at that time. I have written about it in the Glory Box section of my website if you wanted to read about that. I've written you a little horoscope, but in that I was talking a lot about this sort of serpentine kind of language. There feels like there's a massive clearing in your first house at this time, Scorpio rising. Not only have we said goodbye to the dragon's tail and that enforced feeling of shedding the skin, revealing the new version of yourself, the bravery that takes, but also on the 18th of November, just gone, Mars, one of your guiding lights, became exactly conjunct with the sun, which is called a cazimi. And so that is a moment that signifies a new cycle for Mars. And so if we think about the 2 years moving forward, Mars is going to have a lot of your essence and speak to a lot of the themes that you are good at over the next 2 years. Things like strategy, things like holding out until the time is right, things about only playing the ace when needed. There's going to be revelations that occur. There's going to be a lot of deep emotional chats that occur, and perhaps things that were compartmentalized for a time will come to the surface. And so in those moments, we're really going to be looking to you, Scorpio rising, because these are parts of what makes you so wonderful and so beautiful, is your ability to feel those depths. Perhaps we might not always see it because of that ice, but there's definitely an intensity to the feeling. Now, let's switch our attention back to Gemini, shall we? So this full moon is playing out in your 8th house, which is a place that you're incredibly adept at. It's difficult, and the 8th is where we learn about grief and find the language for that. The 8th is where our resources are interwoven and intertwined with other people, and we forge those bonds, and then we have to loosen our grip and set them free. Because you're a Scorpio rising, there's less fear around this part of life, and maybe greater ability to talk about it as well. Gemini. The energy of Gemini can be a real divide. In tarot, Gemini is the Lover's card. And so what looks like a beautiful moment, one of the most important, as they say, times in life for a human to experience, there's also a commitment here about light and shade. There's a mirror that can be represented by the glyph of Gemini. 2 points bouncing light off one another, revealing and showing. You can see yourself in the eyes of your lover. They can see themselves in your eyes. But it's not all happy families. It's not all brightness. Some of it can be really difficult. And hopefully by finding a balance with one another, you can show up for each other when the going gets tough. Gemini has a difficult relationship with over-processing. Sometimes the conversation doesn't stop. It just goes and goes and goes and goes. And if it's lopsided, it can become really anxiety-inducing, and there can be sort of limits that start to show up. A boundary appears because of the thought processes that one has faced or one has built up over time. At 4 degrees of Gemini, so the first decan of the sign, we talk about the 8 of Swords, and this is a picture of that idea. But what we must remember and remind the person suffering an 8 of Swords moment is that they are not as trapped as they think that they might be, because they think with the swords. The swords are our thoughts, our mind, the way that we process information and remember it. And so for a time here, there's a feeling of being caged in by the memory of loss, by the memory of fear, the memory of pain. And we can't really do anything but trust and wait and provide support for somebody who's in this moment. And when we're in this moment ourselves, we need our relationships to show up for us and to help us lift that blindfold off too, to process these thoughts, to find strategies, active ones, to go through the hallmarks of grief, or go through the act of learning about the mind enough to be able to regulate. Anxiety is a crippling thing for a lot of people, a lot of Geminis. And the good thing about that, though, is that Gemini is always willing to learn more and always seeking out more information. So when it comes to techniques of mental regulation to heal our mental health, Gemini is really wanting to learn those lessons. Now, I'm going to speak about Mars again now, because there does feel like a bit of a pressurized moment. A lot. So Mars, your guiding light, and Saturn are the two planets in the zodiac that might be considered the malefics, which means that the lessons or the activation or the results of their influence are much harsher to deal with. And so when in conflict, a square from Mars is difficult, a square from Saturn is difficult. When they're squaring each other, that feels like a boiling kettle. And so the last square between these two planets occurred in November of 2021, which is a very pertinent time for us all to recall. I'm rapidly realizing this was the instigation of the Taurus-Scorpio eclipse cycle. That story was unfolding at this time. And also there was a square between Mars in Scorpio and Aquarius, where Saturn was. So for you, your sense of self and your home, your root system, your sturdiness, your access to a safe space to land, there was a movement of Saturn through that part of your chart. And there was a square, a friction that happened between November 10th and November 17th of 2021, if you need exactitude. The Gemini full moon of that year was December the 19th. So this time of year, 2 years ago, same but different kinds of reactions and feelings. When I look at the chart, your birth chart, we're talking about Sagittarius in your second house of your resources, your values. This is where Mars is. So this is sort of perhaps something about your autonomy that's coming to light, your ability to provide for yourself and provide for those that need you. There's a really emotional conversation that's happening in your 8th house, your grief zone. The square is showing up in Pisces in your 5th house of your individual self-expression. So perhaps there's memories of the past of an unstable home environment that's led you here, or perhaps there's something that there's the long game that's starting to reveal itself, Scorpio rising, about your lineage and about how you have come to express yourself because of the life that you've lived. Saturn in Pisces will be like a 2-ish year story. So if we look at it in terms of Mars being wearing your costume for the next 2 years, waiting until the right time to reveal what it is that you need to reveal, and Saturn moving through your house of self-expression, creating a container and a boundary. Perhaps you're finessing something here. I'm not sure if you're working towards a creative project, maybe. There's something about being discreet which is really showing itself quite strongly in this astrology. It might be disparate, it might not be working like that. As you look out and look around, you can see that there's sort of this energetic sort of force field that's bubbling over. But you've been through so much enforced shedding, Scorpio rising, that I think it's high time for you to take this moment in quiet and to come to know your new skin, to come to know the patterns of your new scales. Moving forward, we're going to need your kind of intensity. We're going to need your kind of bravery too. Remember, Mars is very brave. The sign Scorpio speaks to the action of going into battle to save our souls, to save our essence, to save our faith and our hope. Now, those kinds of languages at a time such as this reminds me of all of the battles that have been fought in the name of a deity, a god, a true religion. And this is something that we know that we have to move away from. The multiplicity of faith-based systems and the honesty on the ground as far as someone's individual sense of faith is a powerful act, and it can provide hope in times of crisis when it comes to warping that power to enact control over people or to claim something or to manipulate others. That's something that we cannot abide by any longer. The way that you're expressing or learning, perhaps there's something about repetition here too, I feel, with Saturn. It feels strict and it's not as intuitive perhaps as you'd like to be in your creative zone, in your studio, but there's something that's emerging from you that you've got your life so far to thank. This is the lesson coming now. I'm going to get you some tarot, Scorpio rising. I'll bring her up now. I'm just looking at the asteroids too. I like to include them and sort of speak about them when they come to me. And they're sort of coming to me in like a bit of a staccato rapid fire at the moment. I'm reading a lot. You can see I've got Cassandra Speaks there by Elizabeth Lesser. My mum just gave me that book to read. And I'm really finding a great space for myself at the table of the reimaginings of the classic myths. And it's this version of storytelling that I'm really responding to. Sometimes the tomes of the great classics can feel quite austere, and we must remember that they are written by the hand of man, mostly, if not always. And in contemporary mythology, one of the ideas about using mythology in astrology as well is that we do have interaction, we do have access to these archetypes. And so I'm thinking about Ceres right now, because Ceres, the asteroid, at this full moon will be in exact square with Saturn. Mars will have moved away from exactitude because it happened the day before, but then Ceres takes the place, and Ceres is facing off with Saturn, or with Kronos. Now, Ceres is the asteroid that teaches us about cultivation, about patience, about learning from the natural cycles of the earth, about agriculture, but also about the commitment to the underworld, a commitment to retrieval from darkness. Ceres is one of the asteroids that does speak to an understanding and a devotion to like holding vigil through bouts of depression or moments of sorrow for folks that they love. And so if I think about this, I think about there's I feel protected by Ceres whenever I see that there's some sort of aspect here. Sometimes we can speak about our caregivers. Oftentimes, if we're to embody the archetype, we speak to our own conviction. And I think that a Scorpio rising would be one of the people that knows all too well the incredible depths that we are all susceptible to plummeting to, and the sacred act of holding vigil, either for someone that we can see who is suffering, or relinquishing control enough to receive that help and support when we are suffering ourselves. And so this test of expression, maybe this Saturn energy in your fifth house, it might feel a bit like artist's block. Maybe there's something about you've either just been through, or you're worried about losing inspiration again. That can be terrifying. I'm bringing this up because I want you to remember and hold in your back pocket that Ceres has her eye on this. Now in your tarot, I got the Fool in the center and I got swords either side. I got the 5 of swords and I got the 7 of swords, both really difficult cards of agitation and conflict with others, perhaps barbs of truth, perhaps altering or differing perspectives and arguments that need to be proven wrong, or there's a righteousness here in some way that you need to be proven wrong. Perhaps there's like a mincing of words too. It feels very clunky with the 5 and the 7. There's something untrustworthy about these two, both in different ways. And there's something about kind of knowing the right time when to set tools down and to disengage from an argument or a sparring match, that there is going to be no winners as far as you can see. What I really love is that the Fool is like jumping out from the center of this reading, Scorpio rising, and this is you with your skin shed. This is the you that has been waiting for the past 2 years to emerge. This has been the suffering that you've been able to process and to move through. This is the beginning of the Mars cycle for you. It would be really good for you to remember to maybe just check to see where Mars is in your astrological intake, in your information. Have a look at what is happening with the planet and where they're moving to next. Because it just feels so poetic that finally your skin has been shed and you are free and you can see again and you're ready to move back into the rhythms of life. And you've got a beautiful helper. You've got Mars, and I dare say Ceres, backing up Mars. I've been watching Ceres in the relationship with Mars for the past few months. They've been in tandem. They've been sort of taking one another's place and moving together. So I like that sense of like nurturing that's attached with this feeling too. It's not all bravery and bolshiness, and you don't have to set down your fear or your vulnerability, Scorpio. In fact, you might even find a new language to describe just how brave you have been to face what you have faced, to face this metamorphosis, this transition. Transitions are never easy. And you've done such a brilliant job. That's your reading, Scorpio rising. Oceans of love, deep from my heart to yours. Now, we're moving into gift-giving season. And if you've been thinking about what gifts you might like to give, I'm inviting you to give me as a gift. If you'd like to book a reading for a loved one to offer as a gift over the coming months, then send me an email at youareok@umaruby.com and we can organize a gift voucher for said loved one. If you've not had a reading from me yourself and you think that the time is now, you can book in straight away at umaruby.com. You can support my work here in horoscope land at buymeacoffee.com/umaruby and subscribe for 10 Australian dollars a month. And you can also throw some money in the tip jar there too. Great big pride and love to you, Scorpio rising. You've done such a brilliant job and you're about to do even more brilliant work. So I look forward to it. I look forward to seeing how that shows up for you. And I look forward to holding hands, all of us together, and facing what we need to face, having those harder conversations, and perhaps even yelling at the moon. You don't have to fear that the moon will be upset with you. You can yell. You can scream. You can howl at the moon. Much love. Hello Pisces rising, welcome to your horoscope for the Gemini full moon happening on November the 27th on Monday at 8:16 p.m. if you're in the southern hemisphere with me. So if you're near on the globe to where I am, you might want to look to the eastern horizon at 8:16 exactly, because the moon will be rising. It will have just risen over that eastern horizon, and it's at that moment that it will be exactly full. And it's at that moment where it will receive what you need to say. We're speaking about Gemini. We're speaking about conversations of the mind. We're speaking about duality, light and shade. Now, for you on your birth chart, Pisces rising, Gemini rules the 4th house, which is our home, our roots, our stability and our privacy. And so it feels to me that there's going to be some big conversations that occur around this topic. There might be some things that you need to release at this time, gently as you go, because there might be some sadness that occurs. There might be some tension or some more difficult realizations that are showing up for you. It might just be simply a lamentation. It might be a sadness. Now, the sun is at 4 degrees of Sagittarius, which is lighting up your 10th house in the opposite direction of your career, your legacy, your most public self, what you wish to be known for, and lighting up the moon in your 4th, so lighting up those private chambers. Now, Mars, the planet that is brave, that is valiant, that is courageous, has just been through something of like a trial by fire with the sun. It's called a cazimi, when a planet is in exact conjunction with the sun, and it sort of changes from being an evening star and turns into a morning star. So Mars and the sun in Scorpio on the 18th of November had their moment. And it was sort of like a revelation. Scorpio for you, Pisces rising, is the 9th house. So it's your access to faith, your access to religious studies, to philosophy, to astrology, to publishing what you know. Again, quite visible. And there may have been something about a reckoning with what it is that you believe in. Moving with this, we know that Mars, the planet, is right at home in Scorpio. Mars rules Aries and Scorpio in different ways. In Aries, it feels like a match and it feels like a headfirst charge. In Scorpio, it's staid and it's analytical and strategic. So what this cazimi, this coming together, brought with it was a new cycle of Aries. Mars. It takes 2 years for Mars to go around the zodiac, and so it was completing and beginning a new cycle, which is to say that for the next 2 years, Mars will be possibly imbued with a sense of strategy and long-term focus, which is something that we really need to harbor in you at this moment, Pisces rising, because Saturn is still in Pisces, still in the 1st house of the self. It will be triggering your rising placement at some point over the next 2 years in exactitude. I know what that feels like. It is agonizing, particularly after you've just come off the back of a Pluto transit over your sun. That's by the by, that's very personal to me. But this boundary, this rule setting, this obligation, that we need to harness in you in regard to your mission, your Pisces-ness, what it is that you're here for, is actually going to be experiencing pressure with this moon. So think about it. The 10th house of legacy, the 4th house of privacy, the 1st house of self. A square is an argument. The day before this Gemini full moon, Mars will have formed that square exactly. And so there may have been some kind of real friction between your sense of self-worth, your sense of who you are, belonging, purpose, and what it is that you hope to achieve in your legacy. It feels like an argument, and it feels like a real harrowing, difficult moment that perhaps this Gemini full moon is echoing in its light and its shade, in its want to lash out and retaliate, or to run away and dissociate. If we can rely on the fact that Mars has just been born again, and so we'll be focusing on your Scorpio, we'll be focusing on your access to faith, your writing, your ability to translate, then this will work. We can work with that. We can argue with ourselves. We can feel so uninspired or at a loss for words that frightens us. We can remember in those times that is just for a moment, that it will pass. We can think about who else is in Sagittarius right now as well, because there's an influx of fire. Sagittarius is mutable fire, so like candles, like mutable water, there's a malleability and there's an understanding that happens in these signs. Mercury is very uncomfortable in Sagittarius because it would much rather be in Gemini, where it works. Information moving at all times. Frenetic messaging. Mercury is forming a square with Neptune in Pisces, so there might be some agitation in your internal workings that are telling you that you're deluding yourself, that you've lost the plot, that you are a bullshit artist. Because Mercury in a sign opposite to home can be quite cruel. There's a multiplicity, a multifaceted nature, a duality to Mercury as well. However, Mercury is also in exact trine with the dragon in Aries, in your 2nd house of values, talent, worth, and resources. So take this harshness, this critique, this cruelty internal, part of your Gemini-ness, part of perhaps your Catwoman, not your Selena, is lashing out and wanting to burn it all to the ground. Take that friction and find the way forward with that and preempt what the dragon will bring to your 2nd house of your values, your talents, your self-worth. Because this is the story that we're going to be experiencing in eclipse for the next 20 months or so, with Mars having just been baptized in Scorpio. So that's a conversation that I'm really interested in having. Catwoman's a totem goddess of mine. That's the truth. I saw the movie when I was 8 years old and it stuck with me. I was never really a Batman fan before or after, really. I liked the animated series, but it was that image of Catwoman that, in a language that I didn't understand, I was far too young to see it, but I knew what she was talking about, and I was so drawn to the image of this incredibly powerful, incredibly painful character. What I like to think about in terms of making sense of my life in astrology is that when the movie Batman Returns premiered in 1992 on the 16th of June, probably at 5 p.m. when they usually show the movie for the first time in Hollywood, the sun was in Gemini at 26 degrees in exact conjunction with Venus. the planet that would bring me art and hope and beauty and access to my femme. I think that that's really lovely. And it also speaks to my Gemini moon in a lovely way. There's a conversation that happens there. There's a grounding for me in my fourth house in some way where my moon resides. So that's just a little fairy story about the possibilities of astrology. I'm learning rapidly that we don't use astrology to predict. We don't use astrology to... Part of the biggest lesson for me, I'll be honest with you, Pisces rising, was seeing the patterns, learning about them. My heart was broken when Australia said no, and I had worked to try and make things happen, to learn the patterns of the sky, learn the astrology of this country, and to figure out a way to evade that eclipse in Libra. Part of my mind was thinking, it's not going to work out. This is an eclipse of justice. And so from there, I was like, well, what's the point in seeing the pattern if you can't do anything about it? But by consistently sticking to task and using the fire, the trial by fire, the initiation of Mars in Scorpio, my ninth house where I learn about this stuff, my ears are open and I'm listening to astrologers that I admire and respect, and their language for the importance of not astrologizing the reality of trauma and crisis in life. We can see it coming. We can't love and light it away. We can't explain it with the constellations, and then that's it. Especially if you're a Pisces, because that's going to really hit really hard. And with this square with Neptune, who's working to keep generating that magic, this square with Mercury is like, you are a faker and you're a liar. So we've got to reframe why we do this stuff in the first place. Why do folks come and get their cards read? Why do they get their astrology read? It's to give their lives some sense of context and to give them the opportunity to allow their life to mirror the sky above through conversation, and to make them feel that they have the right to be here, to come back to earth. Sometimes for a Pisces rising, that's so difficult to stay here. We'd much prefer to swim away into the ether. So by learning about Catwoman's astrology, I find a sense of grounding and a sense of context in my story, as far as witnessing the continual cycle of traumatic events across the globe, the pain that we feel on behalf of others, and the powerlessness that we feel perhaps in our privilege of not knowing exactly how to divest or divert our want to help. There are ways and there are avenues for us to continue to learn about this. And we need to listen to those that are brave enough to lead these charges and to put our time and investment into making practical change for these things. You're not a failure, Pisces rising, and it's tempting to disappear. But we must keep you here, because this is a very important part of the astrology, this trial by fire, this conviction, this test with Saturn in the first house. Go with that container. Go with that opportunity to learn more. If you misunderstood something, that's okay. You can learn a different pathway. You can expand on your knowledge. But don't give up. Don't give up. I'm going to get you some tarot. Gemini's intense. The moon, FYI, is right here. 4 degrees of Gemini, the first decan, it's the 8 of Swords. So we can give our mind frame a sense of context too. And we can remember that this figure is not as trapped as they think they are. There is a way out. There's a way through. that the swords in tarot represent thought forms, our mind, our memories. Gemini loves to bring things up and to chat about it. Mars in Scorpio is on the strategic warpath to bring things up too. I got the star. There's nothing to hide, Pisces rising. There's a sense sometimes that you might feel that you don't belong here or that you don't belong anywhere. And that's something that we can gather together and identify with, and we can refute the fact that you don't belong here, because you do. We all have our different strengths and different strings and different rhythms. We're trying as best we can to work together. If we remember that we are good people and that we have nothing to hide, then we can move and we can continue with our work, and we can be proud of the fact that we're doing it as an act of service, that we're trying to help. These horoscopes are nothing more than just 15 minutes of ASMR for you. Sometimes I think about that. It's just a chat with a girlfriend. I'm cross-legged in your bedroom, sitting there, yabbering on, rabbiting away. That's good. The Hanged One, the Five of Cups. Scorpio in the 9th house speaks to a lot of grief surrounding organized structures of religion. And I can understand the compulsion to be faithless. And when sort of journeying with these different kinds of languages and sort of trying to find some sort of cosmic context for our lives and access to hope, if we've come from a background where religion was weaponized, or there was a series of commandments of which we do not ascribe ourselves to, and therefore we have sinned, then we start to feel faithless. For the longest, for the majority of my life, I was so reluctant to speak about how I felt my spirit moved in this world. There were metaphors that I would use. There was different guises and masks that I would enact and perform in different ways. There was definitely a feeling of true connection that I couldn't put past myself anymore. But that grief about the ways in which faith had been weaponized against me and against those that I care about, and had been used as a tool of manipulation, is a difficult hill to surmount. Because when it does come into a deeper understanding or a deeper working with this sort of stuff, you can start to feel like a friggin' fake or a guru. You can start to hear your ears very tuned in to lies or to lip service or to bullshit. And so with reluctance, you set down your sigils or your signifiers of hope. You become more pragmatic in your thinking. The grief that surrounds that part of our lives is what we're working towards with this Mars trial by fire in Scorpio. It's going to inform what we believe in. It's going to inform our values and our access to resources. It's also going to help us with this feeling of entrapment. The Hanged One is beautiful in its reflection of Pisces, of being able to just let it go. Some things we need to talk about before we can let it go. That's your reading, Pisces rising. I adore you. Now, we're heading into gift giving season. Here's the plug. So if you'd like to book a reading for somebody else, if you'd like to gift them with a voucher, email me at yourok@umaruby.com and we can organize a voucher for your loved ones. If you'd like me to read for you and you've not found the opportunity, treat yourself. Head to umaruby.com and book yourself in a reading with me. I'll draw you up a birth chart that looks something like that. You can support my work over at buymeacoffee.com/umaruby and subscribe for 10 Australian dollars a month, or you can throw some money in the tip jar. Let's talk about it, Pisces rising. Let's use this Gemini full moon to really talk about it. If the act of talking about it with the moon turns you on, sounds good to you, by all means, do it. We've got to remember that the moon will take everything that we have to give and will never, ever leave us. So if you need to scream and yell about your ancestry, about your roots, about your faith, about your sense of self-worth that wavers, about your pain, scream it to the moon. And I'll be with you in 2 weeks, and we're going to strategize with the remainder of Sagittarius energy. We're going to look to your public-facing self, your career, your legacy, and we're going to work with the energy of the black night, the dark night, the new moon, to plant some seeds and to work with Saturn and to work with this new Mars that we have going. That's it. I love you.